It's been a while, but you are once again listening to another episode of the Coaster101 podcast. I'm Andrew Stillwell, and I'll be the first to tell you, real life has been a little crazy. We just got a puppy. She likes to bite my hands at like 5 a.m, and when I run out of time, unfortunately, the first thing to go is the podcast. However, when you have the opportunity to talk to a living legend in the theme park industry, a returning guest to the Coaster101 podcast, you get inspired, you fire up the microphone, you fire up the headphones, because I tell you, I am so excited. We're welcoming Dave Cobb back to the Coaster101 podcast. Dave, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me. Howdy, everybody. I'm a big fan. I still listen to you, and I was happy to be on the show before, so happy to be back.
Yes. So this is, again, we're talking 4 years ago at this point. I was looking back. It was 2021.
Yeah.
And it was the only episode I've ever done that we required 2 parts because the conversation with Dave was so good. I said, I'm going to talk to this man all night. It's the way it's going to work.
That just means I'm full of hot air and can talk forever, basically. So,
No. You're full of great stories. But like I said, 30 plus years in the industry. For those who don't know the name Dave Cobb, and not the musician Dave Cobb, we're talking theme park Dave Cobb here.
Yep, Dave Cobb, the producer of the Star Is Born soundtrack with Lady Gaga and a bunch of country artists. And I get emails and tagged messages in social for him all the time. And
yes,
and I've actually messaged and I've actually messaged him, and I'm like, he goes, yeah, I get notes from like coaster fans and theme park guys all the time. And I'm like, we get each other's fan mail. So we decided if we ever are in the same city at the same time, we need to get together and take a picture and tag each other in it and break the internet. So
I love that so much. It is funny, on your link tree, I was looking, it's like you've got all this stuff that you've done, and at the bottom it's like, and if you want to talk to the musician, here's his website. It's great. Yeah, it's fantastic. Exactly. But for those who don't know your work, like I said, 30-year industry career, give us just the top level stuff. Who is Dave Cobb? What has he worked on?
Top level stuff. Well, so I've been working in the immersive design industry in theme parks and museums and attractions and everything in between, like Andrew said, about 30 years or so. I started as a tour guide at Universal in Hollywood right out of high school, and went to film school, thought I was going to work in the movie industry. Through a chain of events, found myself in an entry-level position at what used to be called Universal Planning and Development, which is now Universal Creative. And I was a project coordinator there on a very famous ride called Back to the Future for its installation at USH. And so learned about the industry that way, and saw an attraction from nothing in the ground opening day, and realized, hey, this is cool. I'm going to keep trying to do this, and ended up being a show writer and a designer at companies like Landmark for a while, and then Paramount Parks when they still owned the parks in the U.S., which we're going to talk about today. Thinkwell, I was there for about 14 years or so. The other big attractions that people would know me from are Men in Black for Universal Studios Orlando, which just turned 25 this year, and Warner Brothers World Abu Dhabi, which I was the park-wide creative director for the entire thing, with 25 rides and attractions based on DC Comics, Looney Tunes, Hanna-Barbera, Tom and Jerry. And that was a big chunk of my career at Thinkwell. And then for the last, when COVID hit, it hit the industry pretty hard. I sort of pivoted to game development. I've been working for an augmented reality, mixed reality startup for about the past 4 or 5 years, working in both tabletop AR experiences, but also location-based AR experiences. I recently worked on a big project for the Make-A-Wish Foundation that people will be hearing about more in the coming months and years. And that's what I've been doing. And so now it's funny that you called me for this, because I'm actually back working freelancing for Paramount again, because they still have that little design office, even though they don't own the U.S. parks anymore. They still do international development to license out their IP as attractions to international parks. And so I've been working with So I've been working with them back on the Paramount lot for about the last month and a half, 2 months.
So it all kind of comes full circle, and it's a perfect time to bring you back to the podcast, because on the Coaster 101 website, last month in June, we just celebrated our 20th anniversary,
Yeah.
which, first of all, crazy. Maybe I'm just biased, but the fact that our little corner of the internet has existed for 20 years, shout out to John who created it like in his parents' basement, but we've continued to grow. And we've got a recurring series right now on the website of roller coasters that are also turning 20 in 2005, or turning 20 in 2025 because they opened in 2005, because that's how
Right.
math works. And so we've got coasters like Matagani, which was canon at Liseberg, a couple of coasters at the Disney parks overseas. But one of the most important coasters to me personally, and I'm biased, even though it opened in '06 at my closest park, was the Italian Job Stunt Track, which opened at Kings Island and Canada's Wonderland in 2005. This is during the time when Dave was the senior creative director at Paramount Parks, working on projects with IPs like Star Trek and Survivor and Tomb Raider and School of Rock the musical, which I also saw at King's Dominion. But he was the creative director for the Italian Job Stunt Track, based on the 2003 film starring Mark Wahlberg, Charlize Theron, Edward Norton, a whole slew of people. And it is a roller coaster that exists now in 3 locations: Kings Island, Canada's Wonderland, King's Dominion. We got to talk about this, Dave, because right now we're audio only. Right before we started recording, you dropped me what I'm going to consider a treasure trove of the most just nerdiest deep dive theme park nerd, like concept art and development and what am I looking at here? This is the Italian Job Stunt Coaster, like concept deck, like 20 slides of just how great this, like
the sculpt of the ride vehicle in progress, I think I sent you, and the under construction photos, and what else is in here? There's a mock-up of the finale that we did for scale to figure out how big it was going to be in real scale, storyboards for the finale. Like right, what happened was I just went to my Dropbox and I typed in, I know this stuff is in here, but I'm so poorly organized. Let me just type in Italian Job or IJST, and I typed in a couple of search for terms, and I found like I sent you 10 links, and it was just full of stuff. It was all photos and things that I had kept over the years. I was telling you before we got on the call, the funny thing is a lot of this stuff I had as portfolio stuff on my personal portfolio back in 2005, 2006, probably up till about 2008 or 9. And it never made it anywhere else on the internet because we didn't have social media. It was just there for me, like, to show people, here's what I've worked on. I never thought, oh gosh, people are going to rip all this stuff and share it. And it never happened. So here you go.
Well, the good news is I've got it, and we'll probably, to the highest bidder, we'll give it out. Not really, but I want to talk kind of about the development of a coaster like this. Obviously, Paramount Parks, they had the movie IPs and the television IPs, but this was a film that came out in 2003. The coaster opened in 2005. When you're developing something like this, how far in advance was the park, did they give you the coaster and they're like, hey, here's the IP, we want to theme it around? What is that process like?
So, when I was working for Paramount Parks, I had started working for them in about 2002 or 2003, and it was not for the US parks. Paramount has a small operation at the studio here in Hollywood that was licensing for international parks, like Universal Disney level parks and attractions. You've heard a lot about them. They had a UK park there going for a while, and it's been in the news that they're never going to be owner operators, but they've always been interested in the international market. So I was working for them because the development and ownership of the US parks was done out of North Carolina. It was done in Charlotte near Carowinds. It was all the old King's Entertainment offices when they bought the parks in the 90s, right? And so that office had been open doing design and marketing and everything for, at that point, about a decade, I guess. They bought them in the early 90s. And somewhere around, when was it? Like 2003 or 4, that design office shut down, and Anthony Esparza, who headed up that office, went to Herschend. I think he's still with Herschend now. And they decided that the offices in Charlotte would just be marketing, operations, food and beverage, retail, right? And they sort of looked at us at the studio in Hollywood and said, "Hey, by the way, you're in charge of the development for the U.S. parks now too." So we were doing these big concept designs for like international scale, large scale projects, but also, hey, you're doing regionals, which is a whole different muscle to flex, right? And I had not really worked on a lot of regional park scale projects. So I actually saw it as a really fun opportunity. How do we take the same thinking that we're doing behind, you know, proposed, you know, 80, $100 million attractions and do it for 8 instead, right? Or less, right? And so it was a real great education for me. That's how it started for me personally, was it was just sort of handed to me like, hey, go. And so the regional parks, you know, all parks have every year, they've got a set capital budget that's brought down on high from here's how much you have to spend. It goes towards everything from maintenance to painting things to new attractions, right? So a section of that every year, a year or two out, they'll usually 2 for the bigger attractions. They'll be like, hey, we're earmarking this much. This is the market we want to hit with it, and the kind of attraction we want, go. And so at the studio, they would do a modicum of brand research to see what people liked, but a lot of it came from us, just to say, you know, what would be really good for that budget level and and that market you want to reach. And so it was really a scrappy little group. It was not focus grouped within an inch of its life. It was really freeing. It's an environment that I've never worked in again since. It was so much fun to sort of be working with the actual, you know, like general managers of each park, right? That kind of world is going away now that the parks are doing, you know, with the big purchase now, they're getting rid of individual GMs. But there was a time when those guys really sort of helped establish what those parks were. And so I had these relationships one-on-one with these guys, and they'd be like, here's what we want. So the way something like Italian Job happened originally was, the edict was, we had a set budget, which was about $8 million. It wasn't very much. And it was for a family thrill coaster, right? And nowadays, those are really common. You look at something like Hiccup's Wing Gliders at Epic, which is, to me, like the best attraction in the park, believe it or not. It's a great park and I have everything, but that's the one that I rode like 4 times because it's so charming and so thrilling and so fun. It just hits so well. And that market for a launch coaster for families that didn't invert did not exist in 2003 at all, right?
100%.
I'm not going to take credit that we created, but it's something we did identify. We're like, hang on a minute, this could be more than we think for $8 million. Like, this is more than a kiddie coaster. This is way more than that. You have enough money to do something really fun here. And so initially, the first concept that came out was not Italian Job, because it was a family audience. We went for, originally the pitch was not the same track layout, not the same ride system. We went for a pitch around the Addams Family. And
really,
yeah, and what it was a Gerstlauer. What's the one that's the fighter, the Eurofighter?
The Eurofighter, right?
One with the vertical lift and the over vertical drop. Okay, so imagine taking that layout, putting it in a very simple indoor box, and making the lift and the drop the front of the Addams Family house, like inside that tall piece. And like the windows would shatter, would flap as you went down. And it was basically like, we pitched it as Tower of Terror on a budget, right? Like family Tower of Terror for a regional park. And it was real cute. Like, the exterior of the building would just be the front. The rest of it's a big dark building with, you know, we pitched at that point, Mummy had opened. So we were like, it could be just blacklight flats. Like, we can do it really simple. It'd be like family, spooky, Space Mountain-y kind of experience. And we had a great pre-show where you queued through the house, and there was a pulsed pre-show into the load station that was in the living room. And it was all the family was on all these portraits, and the theme song would start. And we weren't using the actors' likenesses. We were going to use a stylized version, right? Like the animators. Of course. And it would be da 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 da, right? And the song would start, and they would all basically march out of their photos into an empty picture frame that was above the fireplace, like at the center of the room, right? And lightning and thunder crashing outside. And then when they finally posed and there's a flash, like they're taking their picture, there would be this huge fireball that came out of the fireplace and a little audience drop, like Backdraft. And it would scare the crap out of you. And then the lights would go out. And in the blackness, you would hear, you know, Uncle Fester or Gomez be like, did it work? are they gone? No, they're still here. Let's move on. And Gomez would open the doors, and you go into this like torture chamber, and the vehicles look like, what do you call the thing where you put somebody inside and it closes with all the spikes in it?
Uh,
Oh,
I'm thinking of the Chokey from Matilda, but I know that's not.
you know what I'm talking about, though.
Yeah.
Somebody's gonna kill me for what this is. Anyway, they look like that, right? They were little torture devices, and Iron Maidens. They look like little Iron Maidens, right? And you go on the ride, and you go up the belfry, and at the top are Pugsley and Wednesday, and they're like trying to harness lightning up there, and the clash of lightning is why you fall. And you go through this spook house scenes full of like spiders and scary stuff just in blacklight. And then you pull into the ending, and at the unload, there's a big banner that says "Welcome Home," and you realize all this was a test, and you actually are in Adams, right?
Huh.
It
That's
was
some
all
next
like,
level stuff for a regional park.
yeah, you're like, it was all a big ruse to invite you to a family reunion. It's like the last scene in the retail would be like the Addams family reunion, and like it was so cute. Like it was just stupid and silly and fun and colorful. The problem was the building, like building an indoor roller coaster at that scale, excuse me, was beyond that budget. There was just no way to make it work. Right. So it's a concept that I fell in love with, but as I often have to do in this industry, I have to kill my darlings and go back to the drawing board and drown my puppies, as it were. Sorry, I'm sorry, you have puppies. I'm not going to say that.
Yeah, I just have a puppy. We can't drown her yet.
Can't drown her yet. I'm sure she's a good dog under all that. She'll figure it out.
She is.
No dog. There's no bad dogs. There are only bad dog owners. They're all good dogs are good dogs. Good girls and Amen. Good boys. Every last one. Anyway, so they said you got to revisit the well on this and think of some other brands. We don't mind if it stays like an animated or a Nick brand, but we'd like something maybe a little edgier. Was the only direction we got. Mm-hmm. And when you start to look at the slate of IP, Star Trek it would have to be indoors to be any good, really. I mean, I know they did that one outdoors recently in Germany, which is actually pretty great. The pre-show and the queue were wonderful. But for that scale and for a family coaster, there weren't a lot of IP that really worked. And I was literally like I think I was in the company coffee shop. It's like a little coffee bean and tea leaf, and it's also the company store. And back in the day, I would get discounts on DVDs, and I would stock up on them, physical media. And I was like, "Oh, Italian Job! I saw that in the theater. I'm going to pick that up again and take it home and watch it." And I'm like, "This movie's a banger! Like, this is a really good little action film." And it's nothing like the original with Michael Caine. If you've never seen that one, it is worth seeing. But it's other than the chase, it's a completely different script. But it is a rare breed of early aughts action thrillers. That's not like a giant Bruckheimer thing. It's this character-driven, slight little bit of comedy. It's very, very Ocean's. It's very Ocean's movie. It feels like Ocean's 11, Ocean's 8, right? It's a similar vibe. The chase scene at the end is chef's kiss. It's so good. And the light bulb just went off in my head. I went, wait a minute, this would be really cool to ride in Mini Coopers. Let's see if we can do this. And so I asked, is this an IP we can use? And they said, actually we can't use the talent, but the Mini Coopers are part of our overall, I think some sort of consumer products licensing for a certain amount of time. They were allowed to make toys and things. And so they said, yeah, go ahead, figure it out. And so we had already been connected to Premiere at that point. We weren't necessarily sold on the Gerstlauer. That was just an example. And we had been talking to Premiere about different models that they had. And they showed us a track layout for something called, was it Adventure Express at Kings Island? It was like an old, it was like an old, not quite Wild Mouse, but not quite terrain coaster. It was an indoor family coaster. Anyway, the only thing we borrowed from that was the chassis and the track, but the track gauge was what was important, because Premiere was like, we can deliver this at the length and track length and ride length that you're looking for in the time that we have engineering wise. Like, we have this, right? So that was handed to me. And I said, all right, let's talk about how to do the ride vehicle into minis. And they said, sure. And we initially started doing track layouts. They would use their big program their internal program to do the layout. But if you notice, the listening viewers can't see this, but I'm wearing a a shirt for No Limits, No
Mm,
Limits Coaster, I'm going to tell you a huge piece of information. The reason that No Limits is used in early stages of coaster design is because of us. Okay,
really?
because of Italian Job, and you can ask the people behind No Limits, and they will tell you the same story. What this is I know you're laughing. You don't believe me, do
I'm
you?
not laughing. Dave, it's like every time you and I talk, I just like I'm sitting here, my jaw is on my desk because it's like the stuff that you tell me is just it blows my coaster nerd heart and blows the mind and fills my coaster nerd heart with joy. Like this
So
is amazing.
so the like No Limits like 1.0 was out at this point in like 2002, and I was playing with it. It was fun, right? I thought, oh, cool, this is nice, and it's not Roller Coaster Tycoon. It's an actual thing where I can really build it and ride it, and I started toying with it with I think a Schwarzkopf track and train, and just started like with one of my designers, knowing how what the footprint was. We started to lay it out in No Limits. And I was in a meeting with Premiere and I showed it to him. They're like, "What's that?" And I'm like, "This is this weird little fan made thing, but I don't know how accurate it is in terms of physics. But it's been fun for us to sort of toy with it in terms of POV and stuff like that." And they said, "Well, let us play with it." And they downloaded it and they got back to me and they're like, "You know what? The physics aren't bad compared to like it's not perfect compared to our actual engineering program that really figures out the physics, but for the price and the speed of laying stuff out, they're like, we're going to use this and try this." And so they did, and we in order to get the right size of vehicle and weight and track gauge, we got in touch with the developers in Germany. They got us in touch with the U.S. guys, a guy named Tom Zelliff. If you haven't had him on the show, you should.
I should.
Tom is like the U.S. guy behind the software, and I've been on the No Limits showdown every year where we
Mhm.
judge and pick the winners. I've been doing that with him for like the past 5 years, but that relationship started in like 2003 because he basically got in touch with fans in the coaster community who would build the right track gauge for us and the right vehicle size and all that. So it was all sort of sourced out to fans because they could and they wanted to. And Premiere did some of it themselves too, but they didn't, right? They didn't have access to the dev kit as much. But the first version of that ride, the first 2 or 3 versions of the guest experience on that ride were done in No Limits. And it was the first time it had been used for any professional coaster layout. As far as we know, like I asked Premiere and I'm like, "Do you know anybody else using this?" And they said, "No,
Mhm.
this is the first time we've ever heard of it." Because it had only come out, I think, in 2001 or 2002, maybe originally.
That sounds right. Yeah.
So like a year or two earlier. And I had just been fucking around with it because I heard about it and I stumbled across some, rec.arts.themepark.org, Usenet group that was posting pictures and things. And because kids, the internet is old. And back in 2002 and 2003, we didn't have YouTube. We didn't,
Nope.
we didn't have chat. You had AOL chat rooms, you had Usenet groups, and that's about it. And so
Yep.
we had to sort of beg, borrow, and steal where we got our theme park information. And I forget where I learned about No Limits, but it was through some fan group somewhere, I think a Usenet group. So we can claim, hopefully, I think we're right, that no one had ever used it in, at least never led to a thing that opened. I think we can definitely claim that.
Right.
But we were the first people to actually use it as a first draft proof of concept layout for a coaster experience.
Wow. And I'm looking through this. I think I found the No Limits images. They say proprietary and confidential, and then they're in my hands. Somebody has messed up. Somebody has messed up. But I'm digging it. And a lot of the layout, the track layout is, I mean, it's very similar, if not exact, to the Italian Job or Backlot Stunt Coaster or Queen City Stunt Coaster, whatever we know it as today. So it is this is amazing. And hopefully one day, Dave, you will let me let I will be allowed to share some of these things to the light of day, because this is like you've given me a gold mine, and I am just like, again, my coaster nerd heart is full and my mind is blown. But
so we had but basically, so we worked that out just to show them that an experience, a family level experience, what it would look like and feel
yeah,
like. and I cut together a little trailer, and that's actually on my. If people go to davecobb.com, which leads to my link tree, if you find my my YouTube on there, if you go to the Paramount Parks projects, you'll find like a pitch reel that I did for the attraction that basically cuts together shots of our No Limits model with footage from the film and music from the movie, and I turned it into a little trailer. And that was what I showed. So we hadn't really designed the full layout or the scenery or any of that yet. We had sort of proof of concept done it in No Limits, figured out that Premiere sort of bought it off and said, yes, we can build that in the time you want. That will most likely fit in the budget. So we showed that as a trailer to Paramount folks, and they went, great, go. And then there's a designer named Larry Nelson who did a lot of stuff with me at Paramount back then. And he is, if you, in the book that you're looking at, he did all of the sketches, like literally everything. And so he came up with those early layouts. Like we gave him the the radii and here's how much track, here's the size of the land. And if you notice, there's some early sketches and concepts in there where the track length is about doubled. We had after you did the launch and then back down from the parking garage before you went into the back 40 and down the subway steps, we had a whole other chase scene basically back there, and it was more streets of LA kind of stuff. And that just came down to cost at that point, like how much track they could afford, And it, to be honest, it was a toss up because we knew we wanted the launch. It absolutely had to be a launch, and that was going to cost a certain amount. And we wanted the point at the end where you're in the sewer tunnel and you jump out of into the culvert. And so it was, is the ride going to be longer, or are we going to have those two things? Was really what the cost boiled down to. And I was like, if it's going to be a movie experience, we need the effect scene, we need the culvert, we need all of that. Like the ride length was still very acceptable and very within guest experience, viability. So we decided to take a risk and say, we're not going to make it a longer coaster. We're going to make it a cooler experience. And, and so you see all the sketches there for a while. We actually had the concrete culvert. We ended up not even really being able to afford that. So that became the billboard that you burst through because a billboard was cheaper. But it killed two birds with one stone. It was like, we already have the walkway going over that makes it look like the culvert. It still has a concrete sort of identity. The billboard then becomes the marquee sign. So we kill two birds with one stone, and it draws people to it, and it's the thing the ride vehicle comes out of, And so it sort of just went from there. And then another big part of it that I tried to argue for and got was onboard audio. That had never been done at a regional park before, ever. It had only been on Space Mountain for a couple of years before that, maybe. And as a kid, and it's funny, I learned this from Tom Morris at Disney as well. I saw him post something years ago that was like his original temp playlist for Space Mountain, right? Of songs that he tried. And he had made a comment about, I used to do this on a Walkman when I was a teenager. I'm like, oh my God, I did the same thing. I used to make mixtapes for Six Flags of songs in the 80s, and I would sneak my Walkman onto the ride under my clothes with the headset underneath my shirt, and on the lift hill I'd put it on and press play, and I'd try to like sync up music. So I'd been trying that for years back in like the 80s and early 90s before any theme park did it. And so when Disney finally pulled the trigger and spent money on Space Mountain to do it, I was like, see, this is worth doing. It's very cool. And so Premiere was committed to doing it. It was a little underpowered for the first iteration in Kings Island. And then because Disney put a lot of engineering money and a lot of time into that system, because you have to basically have a sound system that can get over a noise bed of about 90 to 110 dB. And it has to be consistent power above that, which is a lot. And so there's plenty, and be ruggedized, right? It's got to put up with the vibrations and everything. So for a while, the elements, right? So they were using marine components, the kind of stereos you have on like boats, which did well enough, but they really needed to go a step further. And so for the King's Dominion and Canada's Wonderland, we had better audio systems on those. And while they were still there, they worked great. They ended up, of course, pulling them out when Paramount didn't own the parks anymore, and they weren't doing the license, and they were going to operate the coasters as something else under a different name. But the onboard audio was something I really, really fought for. I said, hey, if you're Paramount and this is based on a movie, movie and it's a car chase scene, we can get a lot of mileage of the theming out of just the soundtrack, which again, if you go to my YouTube, you can hear the actual ride soundtrack on the video. That video of the ride experience was what we submitted to the Thea Awards that year. It didn't win because they didn't really get it. But we've submitted it as excellence on a limited budget, and said this is a regional park with onboard audio and special effects and fire and all this stuff, and it still didn't win, but that's fine. Not that I'm bitter, but so there were things that we fought for that, I don't want to sound snarky here, but it might come off that way, that at the time, and kids today aren't going to know because there wasn't a social media presence for people to talk about this stuff, but the small amount of coaster fandom online that did experience hated this ride because because it was too short. It's for kids. It doesn't go upside down. It's not very fast. Typical complaints from hardcore coaster nerds. And I never defended it online, but if it were to come out today, people would fucking love it, because this kind of thing now happens all the time, because there is a segment of family attractions that want a high thrill for family, but not, super intense coaster experience. No one had really done that. We were one of the first out there to do it. And the fan chatter was remarkably not great when it first opened. But when that ended up happening, like all good sort of long things that last long, got people like you that probably wrote it very young, loved it. It got really great family exit polls. And so they were thrilled with it from a ticket sales and especially season pass sales. It was like, it became the rite of passage coaster. It became, your kid's first big boy coaster. You know what I mean?
Right. It's that step between something like a Woodstock Express, that little family wooden coaster, or the Great Pumpkin Coaster, Lucy's Krabby Cabby.
Yeah.
It's a great step between that and then something like, I'm trying to think of a coaster, like the Racer at Kings Island, for example.
Right. And we absolutely pitched it that way. We said over and over, because from a business perspective, Paramount Parks learned the hard way not to chase the coaster dollar, because in the 80s and 90s there was this huge boom because of CAD design and engineering capabilities, that it just became an arms race, right? Very well.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It just became this huge arms race of bigger, faster, how many more loops, et cetera, et cetera. And Paramount chased that for a while with things like Stealth, with the first suspended or flying coaster. They did a lot of first. They tried a lot of really cool stuff. And the thing is, frankly, for a regional park, it didn't really move the needle, because the teens that come for that don't spend money, frankly.
This is true.
And if you lose your family audience, this happened to Six Flags in the 70s and 80s when they stopped having entertainment in the parks, right? And the Paramount parks that did well are the ones who leaned into Nick and leaned into parades and leaned into live entertainment, because if there's something there for mom and the kids, everyone will go, right? If mom decides who goes, then if it's just thrill rides, it's not necessarily the bang for the buck for the whole family. And, I know coaster fans don't like to hear that, but that's the truth of the regional park market. And good parks balance that. Like, look at a park like Holiday World, right? They've got some of the best freaking coasters on the planet. I love Raven and I love the Voyage so much, but yet it's also kind of the whole place is kind of corny. The Gravy Boat Coaster, and they've got great entertainment. They've got great seasonal stuff that leans into the holidays because of the theme of the park. They are the kind of park that has that balance. And Paramount was trying really hard to find that balance, because certain parks in the chain had gone full tilt into thrill rides and it really didn't work for them. And so when the first coaster fan reviews came out, I wasn't really fazed by it, because I knew it would eventually take hold. And the exit polls for the 2 or 3 years after it opened with families, and the bump in season pass sales, specifically mentioning, why did you do it? Oh, because my kid loves this ride. That made me stupid happy, right? Like this is the kind of ride where, when I was like 11 or 12, before I had the guts to go on anything bigger, I probably would have, or even younger, 6 or 7, you would be the right height and right age for this, right? Like, my first coaster ever was the Mountain Express at Six Flags Magic Mountain, which was a Schwarzkopf kind of wild mousy kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it was not by not any stretch of the imagination the biggest coaster in that park. But when I was like 7, it was scared the shit out of me, right? So excuse me.
Yeah.
Uh, and uh, and that's kind of what I was going for. When we were all talking about this early on, it was like, yes, the movie is a grown-up movie, but family thrill rides are about aspiration. And for a kid to aspire to be a stunt driver and aspire to go really fast and aspire to go around corners and skid out, like that was what we were trying to hit.
Yeah. I can't see coaster fans being negative on the internet. I just don't see that as a thing that exists.
What? Yeah, no, that doesn't happen ever. What are you talking about?
No. Yeah. Everybody's really mad about a robot of Walt Disney today. They're really mad about the Coaster Museum. Everybody's just mad. They need something to be mad about. I don't
Yeah.
understand. But
Yeah, whatever.
This attraction, I mean, again, it's got staying power. We're talking 20 years old of its first 2 iterations, and the King's Dominion iteration will be 20 next year, which is fantastic. I'm looking at this concept art, and to me, one of the biggest highlights for this ride is the scene, probably I'd say 2/3 of the way through the attraction, where you stop and there is a helicopter, there is police cars, there's simulated gunfire, there's fire, there's all sorts of movie effects.
Yep.
Like when you're creating something like that, what other than money, because we know money is the reason that everything gets cut. How is the sky basically the limit when you're just like, hey, we've got this straightaway piece of track, you're gonna stop, you're gonna launch off, but like when you're kind of coming up and ideating that, how does it get to the final version?
So the original inspiration for that scene is the scene in the movie when he's trying to get away from the chopper and goes underneath it's like an overpass, or I think it might even be like a warehouse, and the chopper slides in underneath it, like, and faces off with him, and then he skids out and goes around it, and the blade like hits the back of his car. It's a really, really cool moment, and it's a extremely dangerous helicopter stunt that they really did, by the way. That's not like hanging on a crane or anything. They really flew a chopper underneath an overpass, and hovered there. Like the updraft alone could bring that thing down. It's nuts. It's really, really dangerous. My dad used to be a helicopter pilot, so I remember talking to him about that. I'm like, how do you do that? He's like, oh my god, that the one gust of wind and that chopper would have come down. Anyway, that was the face off with the chopper in the movie was the original concept. And originally, if you look at some of the sketches, I'm sorry, listeners, that you don't see this. That scene was a little bigger, and it was indoors. It was going to be a little warehouse scene. You were going to go indoors, so we had full lighting control, that kind of thing. We just couldn't afford that, so we said that's fine. We can do it outside, and we priced out. The important thing was the chopper, but it wasn't going to be a full animatronic. And you could buy, believe it or not, you can buy, a decommissioned police choppers like that. You buy the shell and nothing else in it for not very much money. And so we bought that, and they put in, a little rotating blades on it, and like prop blades, and put it on a little scissor lift. So it's basically on a little, forklift behind scenery to rise up into view. And it had, strobe lights on the front of its little shotguns, and it would turn a little bit. But the big thing was the water and the fire effects, right? It was a burst of air and water to be like pipes and 55-gallon barrels, like shooting water at you, like you were in some little chemical plant or something that was exploding. And then the last bit was a giant fireball over your head, which is when you would launch down into the sharp down left turn into darkness, or right turn into darkness. So the way that started was inspiration for the movie. The way we got to where it was at was, well, what can we afford for this money? And to be honest, the skepticism in the company, mainly from the parks, right? Because the parks had done a little bit of theming up until then, and back in the day, the King's parks had a little more in dark rides and things, but they were a little skittish for these things. They'd have some misfires on stuff that was overly dark ridey themed. They said, how long do you have to be there for this to make an impact? If it's only like 4 or 5 seconds, that's not worth all that money. And so, again, pointing people to my YouTube, if you go there, there's a little storyboard sequence. It's a little animatic of storyboards with a soundtrack and a little countdown timer in the lower right corner that says, from the moment you pull in to the moment you're launched again, here's what it's going to look like, and here's what it's going to sound like. And we made that so that we could show the park executives and say, you're spending X hundreds of thousands of dollars on this scene for this beat, and this is what it feels like. And they watch the video and go,
Yeah.
oh, that's cool. You know, we
Yeah,
as
this
designers,
actually makes sense.
yeah, and that's just part of the process. You know, a lot of when you're designing, sometimes your clients know what these things are gonna, they can envision them, sometimes they can't. And our job is to sort of communicate that best, and so we storyboarded it like you would a sequence in a movie or a dark ride, and
Mhm.
put a soundtrack to it. The resulting soundtrack on the whole ride was custom. That was all custom music, custom sound design. If you go and listen to the soundtrack, and there's also a track. I think there's 3 videos from Italian Job in that playlist that I have. One of them is the concept reel, the pitch reel.
Mhm.
One is the storyboards. Oh, 4 things. One is the Thea submission video, which is like the finished ride, and then there's another video that is the music from the load station, like the soundtrack from the load. And if you listen to
Nice.
that, there's a production voice, and it's like a helicopter going, oh, Chop Bird has flown, we're ready in position, right? And you hear like a director, and there's like 2 or 3 different voices. It's all me, by the way.
I was
It
I saw this video on your YouTube channel and I was like, you know who that sounds like? It sounds like the tailor at the end of the Men in Black ride who's like, it'll be ready next Wednesday.
It'll be ready next Wednesday. Yeah. Well, you know, sometimes in these projects you get to a certain point where you're just out of money. And so we knew, like, we had that soundtrack in not only in the station but on board the vehicle during the ride. And so we ended up using it on board as you're loading, like production chatter on the radios,
Mhm.
right? To build suspense, and the music would start there, and then action, and it would go, right? So but all of those voices, there's like at least 3 different voices. They're all me, just pitched at different levels and different, acting type deliveries. One's a chopper pilot, one's like a special effects guy, I think one's a director. So yeah, so for a while there I was immortalized in the theme parks.
Of course. Like, and I know you've, again, 30-year career, you've had background in the film industry and, at some of these major parks like Universal.
Yeah.
Looking at the concept art here, what did it mean to you to be able to kind of bring that, I hate to use the Universal tagline, ride the movies,
Yeah.
but this is exactly based on the concept art. This is what you guys were trying to deliver. You were trying to go inside a movie set. The audience, the writers were supposed to be, kind of stunt extras, kind of
Yeah.
creating that backstory. What did it mean to you to kind of bring that from that Universal to, a regional park level?
That was a lot of fun work while I worked. It was a lot of fun to work there. I was there for, I think, about 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a hoot. And a lot of people like, oh, it must be more fun, dealing with 80 $100 million Universal budgets. And like, well, yeah, of course, that's true, but there's also a certain amount of satisfaction and challenge in having constraints. Any designer will tell you, the idea of endless blue sky design where anything's possible is actually not that much fun, because it's like,
Mm-hmm.
give me the challenge. What's the plot of land? How much money do we have to spend? What audience do we want to hit? There's a lot of things that can help define something. And so having those restrictions in a place like a regional park was actually a lot of fun creatively to sort of figure out, because they had gone through an amount of time with their early leadership of when Paramount owned the parks, of what that meant in the parks, right? And they had a couple of misfires. They had like the big Tomb Raider indoor ride at Kings Island was so ambitious. It was so ambitious, and I
Mm-hmm.
loved it, but it was just the wrong. It ended up being the wrong hardware for the idea, because they were asking it to stop on a dime for these scenes, and it never really was supposed to do that. And then so when I came aboard, there were these edicts of like, we can't really do that, we tried that, it didn't work, right? So it was not like I had unfettered access to do whatever I want in these parks. And this coaster is an example of an early success story because of that, where I said, I get it, this has to be maintainable, this has to fit within your existing operation and maintenance people. We're not going to, there's no science projects here, and so because of the success of that, I was allowed to play a little bit. And I don't know if you ever saw the Tomb Raider thing we did for King's Dominion, which was called
Mm-hmm.
Firefall, which is also on
Yep.
my YouTube. And it was just a topspin. It was the same thing they were doing with the other Tomb Raider, which was the giant topspin, very different and indoors. But they were like, we want to do a topspin. We really want to use Tomb Raider again in the park, but we can't do what we did in Kings Island because it's, you know, breaking itself basically.
Yes.
And so I said, all right, well then show me the model and give me the ride program that you're going to buy off on. Give me that first. And so they gave me a video of that. I handed it to I hired a composer friend of mine, Andy Garfield, and I said, write a score to this that sounds like some ancient temple, and that it's this infernal device that we've encountered that. And I sort of pitched a rough story that, like, we've stumbled across this thing in the jungle. It's this big infernal device amongst crumbling ruins, and true believers of whatever ancient societies to strap themselves to it to see if they were true believers, and if they weren't, they were flung into the sun. That was my top level pitch, right? I don't know how we were going to tell that story, but try that. And he came up with some musical themes, and I'm like, this is really fun. And then I showed that to management, and I said, if we built some, because I know you're going to have water effects down there, or they already have them, right? They've got the water that plays with you, that teases you, right? If we can add a couple of, you know, exploding moments of water, just big air cannons, right? And what if we were to do a fire on the water, the crackle fire they do on Universal does, and a little bit of fire effects there. And so they were slowly but surely, they're like, yeah, that stuff's not that complicated. Let's price it out. And so we were allowed to play with this top spin ride with an existing ride program that everybody else in the world uses. But we got to turn it into a little scene from Tomb Raider that you got to be in. And it was Tomb Raider in so much that it was a big, huge movie score and sound effects. The sound effects felt like you can hear it in the video, like it's cranking to life. And, you know, and the angelic chorus is, oh, like it's all going to go wrong. It felt like you were in a stunt scene, and that's kind of how I pitched it. Was just like Italian Job. Let's do something where you feel like you're in the movie. It doesn't matter if it has Laura Croft. It doesn't matter if it has a huge story. And so we ended up telling the story of the ride really simply in the queue with, like, Lara's diaries that were open and their sketches of the ride, and she theorizes what it was for and why it had seats on it, and all the stuff I just told you. Like, we came up with little, you know, mythology for it, and that was enough. That was all it needed. And it was it ran for a number of years. It's called Firefall. I think now it's just called The Crypt. They just took the actual, I don't know if they still play the soundtrack or anything.
It is it's actually gone. So
yeah, somebody did tell me that. Right, that it got torn out. But
it is
but like, that was the fun way to, like, it let me stretch some muscles of what I'd learned at places like Universal, and say, all right, Paramount, you have some fun, engaging brands, and it doesn't mean you have to spend $100 million to realize them in the parks. And so I found working there to be a really fun challenge for that very reason. Those restrictions were the reason it was fun. It's too bad that stuff had to go away because they got bought by people who didn't want to continue the license. But I feel like from that, right, and to be honest, the what inspired Tomb Raider, that ride, was One Fish, Two Fish at IOA. Like, I pointed at One Fish, Two Fish and went, custom soundtrack, water effects, time to the ride, interactivity. Guys, you can do it with an existing ride system. There's a way to do that. That's how Survivor came about. Survivor was another one where they had a ride system that they liked, that they wanted to put in the park because they knew what it would cost. How do you theme it to Survivor? And I'm like, well, it has to be a competition somehow. And we came up with this weird little, and that's on my YouTube as well. And I'm insanely proud of that ride. Everybody laughs when you say Survivor the ride. I'm like, but people loved it. Like, it was the silliness and the dumb, that your dumb reaction is exactly what I wanted, because the show has that reaction. People go, ugh, Survivor, right? So how do you make a ride out of Survivor? Yeah, you make people compete, and if they do poorly, you get drenched on the ride. Like, okay, sure.
Like, that's, and your flame is doused when you get drenched.
And the way that the interactivity came about there is, I was a huge fan at that time. This is like 2004, I think. I was a huge fan of Dance Dance Revolution. I'd bought it for the home version, and I suck at it, but I loved it. And so DDR became the way to do that. And, like, I just got to tell you this part. The engineering of how that worked was so dumb and simple, because we couldn't actually put in pads or any sort of buttons or anything that would complicate or that would cost anything that would do anything interactive, right? So it was
Mm-hmm.
different paths on the video. There was a pass fail at 3 points on the video that we could trigger somehow. And my show control guy, who was this incredibly smart guy, he came up with an idea. He went to look at the site and realized that the load station was a big wooden platform over a big concrete box. And he said, I have an idea. And he put a bunch of microphones down there. And he managed to get a system that would send a trigger based on audio level. And it didn't matter if it was one person or 20. That was the big thing. Like, what happens when nobody's there? Will they be able to trigger these effects at all? And he came up with some sort of algorithm that was listening for volume level and accuracy to the beat. And that's it. And if it passed a certain threshold, it sent signal A or signal B, all done with a single microphone underneath that platform and a very, 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 very smart show programmer. So we made this interactive game out of practically nothing, right?
Right.
I'm insanely proud of the work I did at Paramount because it was a challenge and it was a different market and it was a different mindset.
Right. I've got to ask, though, I know we just talked about how challenges are important. I want to know if there was one element throughout the whole planning process, be it the building, be it more effects, be it a full-size helicopter.
Oh.
If there was one thing you could have kept that got value engineered. A lot of people don't like to say the word cut.
No, we say value engineering. Value engineering.
If there was one thing.
Well, first I'll tell you the thing that I'm most proud of about it. Amongst all of that stuff, there's a thing that I'm most proud that got in that's so simple, only because no one had done it yet. And that is a launch into a helix.
Mm-hmm.
Helices are some of my favorite components of any ride. When I was a kid growing up, my favorite thing was the ending of the Gold Rusher at Six Flags Magic Mountain. When it got to that helix and it got tighter and tighter and it just like, geez, positive G's, oh my God. And then straight into the load station. I loved that moment when I was like 8 years old. It was one of my favorite things in the park. And it's just this stupid, simple little thing. And I'm like, what if we could reverse that? You go into it fast and you come out of it slow and drop. And we get both a launch and a drop. And so that was something that Premiere was like, oh, we've never done that before. Let's try it. And they put it in the model. And I think it's a really fun element because it gives you both a launch and a drop, right? So I'm very proud of that. The thing that didn't happen, that we tried to put it into Kings Island and it got cut for the other ones because it wasn't very effective and we should have spent more money in planning it, was the vehicles themselves were supposed to have a drift skid moment. And we're going to see it now in Hollywood Drift up at Universal, but that's like, a whole controlled system like Guardians of the Galaxy. It's going to be super intense. Ours was, hey, we asked Premiere, can we put a pivot point at the front of every vehicle and have the back just slide out left and right? And can we dampen it? And so that it's a certain amount of G's will make it happen, but it'll recenter itself. And they were pretty confident. Yeah, we can do that. And they said how much, and that became the issue. Like, if it went too far, they would have to completely re-engineer the chassis for dynamic motion beyond the track profile. Right? There's just a whole level of stability there they would have had to deal with, and the connection point would have to beef up. It just would have added a lot of weight. So they said, well, we can do it within 12 inches on every side, basically. So put a ruler on the outside of the vehicle on both sides. And so in essence, you could get, and the vehicle itself was about 2 feet wide. So on a full left to full right, you can get, we felt, God, that's almost like 1.5 feet, like that, or 2 feet plus. That would feel great. And we put it in Kings Island and you couldn't feel it. Like at all.
Oh man.
You could barely even notice it. It needs to be so sideways for you to even feel. And so the resulting versions that we built at King's Dominion and Canada's Wonderland, the thing was taken out completely. And in Kings Island, they welded them shut, and so they never moved again because we had high hopes for it. Premiere was proud of the fact that they got it on an existing engineered platform. They were confident that it would hold up engineering wise and maintenance wise. But experience-wise, it just fell flat. The other part of that
Ah,
was originally the bump down the stairs was going to be a physical bump. Like the seats themselves were going to have a similar thing where they would be activated solely by like it was going to be a solenoid that had bumps in the track, I believe. I forget how they were going to do it, but it was going to be completely passive. It was not like an active motion system, and that didn't pan out in engineering. So we ended up doing that with the audio system. There's super duper butt kickers under every seat, which are heavy duty solenoid based um, subwoofers. So they're not subwoofers that
mhm.
use a flat paper or a speaker surface. It's literally a piston hitting a rubber surface. That's why they're called butt kickers, and they're great. Like they can really crank out a high level of thump, but again at 110 dB floor on every
Right.
coaster, just because of the motion of the ride itself, you could barely feel it. It worked for the music. Like the butt kickers ended up helping give us more low end for music presence. But it for the discrete thump 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 on your butt, it just didn't. Those two things never really panned out.
Gotcha. Well, I've got one further question before we wrap this up. You know, thinking back, this is again 20 plus years ago at this point. Coaster has
Yeah.
been open for 20 years. You've continued to work in the industry. Have you been able to draw any inspiration for things you did from the Italian Job on future attractions? You know, maybe the coasters at Warner Brothers Abu Dhabi or something else like that. I mean, was there inspiration from Italian Job that we could kind of see in newer attractions that you've worked on?
Yeah, all the time. I mean, all the time. Like there's no direct correlation in Warner Brothers World Abu Dhabi, but things like, telling a story on a disco coaster at Riddler Revolution, or adding onboard audio to Fast and Furious for the Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner. All of that you can trace directly back to my experience at Paramount, saying, "Hey guys, this is low-hanging fruit for a big park with a big budget. These kind of things are really low-hanging fruit for us to add value to even the flat rides in your park." um, and I think there's validity to that. I think that the more we are seeing things like audio, literally just audio added to things, is a big deal, and it
Yes.
adds so much in terms of presence, because music in movies is what makes us feel emotion. And so adding that to even the simplest of like spinny rides, I think adds value, and
Hmm.
especially when you look at something like, that's why I was so impressed by One Fish Two Fish, because not only is it a song, but there's kind of light variations on those songs. It's one of the things I love about the Hiccup coaster at Epic. There's like 3 or 4 different versions of that soundtrack, so that it's the same music, but the dialogue is different every time. Every time I wrote it, Hiccups was sort of saying something different, and I was like, oh, you have the playback space. It's just memory at that point, right? If you're playing back the same length, why not record 5 different versions, right? So I think it does carry forward. There's a lot of concepts that I've done over the years that never got built, that directly borrowed things like interactivity and triggered effects and things like that. But just the principle of, hey, regional park rides have value, flat rides have value, and especially with a new park like Warner Brothers, you're always going to have a certain number of those rides because you need them for
Hmm.
capacity, for just daily throughput. So the more you can plus those things up, the better. The harder sell is, can you add it to a park later and have it be marketable, right? Like, Disney didn't market Emotional Whirlwind as a flat ride as a new thing at California Adventure. It's just a nice to have because they already had it. It replaced old capacity, so nothing new. So for me, the harder thing, and it was the thing we found at Paramount that we had to do in regionals, was we have to find a way to make these simpler rides like disco, like a top spin. We have to market them. This is going to be our new ride for the year. So that's the biggest difference for me in regional parks, is the ability to sort of look at something and go, how do we take something that your ride connoisseur might go, ugh, it's another one of those, I've seen it. But your person who goes once a year or once every 2 years, oh, they have something new, let's go ride it, that looks fun. And how do we plus it up for them?
Exactly. I feel that way now, especially, my home park is Carowinds. It is a regional park, and we've been very blessed the last 10 plus years,
Yeah.
new coasters, new family attractions, new
Yeah.
water park, new all this.
Yeah.
But sometimes it is the simple stuff. I mean, their new attraction this year, one of them is a Mock Rides interactive boat ride that
Oh,
is
cool.
it is designed for children. It's themed to Charlie Brown. I rode it this weekend. I got off that ride. I have not laughed so much on a
Oh.
theme park attraction in I don't know when.
Oh, I'm
How
gonna go
long?
look at the
Like,
video online. That sounds adorable. I love those
yeah,
interactive boat rides. They're so cute.
they're awesome. And like, it was me and my brother and a friend of his. So we're three childless men in our 30s. And we're gonna ride this ride designed for children because I write for a blog and I'm gonna write about it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We had such a good time. We're like, do we want to do that again? And we're sopping wet. So I totally get it. Like, even if it's simple, even if it's easy, like,
Yeah.
it's like, if you could market it and do things to market it, I totally get it. I love it.
Yeah, I think that, and that's the a lot of the times the marketing people are the ones who say this stuff doesn't work. But I think what ends up happening is you see, hey, maybe 2 or 3 flat rides together is still cheaper than a family coaster. But if we put them together and put a theme around them and add some effects and music, like maybe that's a thing, like mini lands or an
For sure.
extension of this idea of how do we take the building blocks of what make a day at a park is not all it's you can't Craig Hanna of Think Well used to say a thing all the time. A theme park is a good meal and it can't be all steak. You can't have a steak appetizer and a steak entree and a steak dessert and a steak cocktail. Like it just you're going to get bored of steak. So by having a well-rounded meal at a park, that includes these tiny little things as well. And I think there's possibility in making those things as memorable as the big stuff.
I love it. Awesome. Well, Dave, thank you so much for coming on, rejoining the podcast, and getting me out of my miniature puppy-induced hiatus. But this was an incredible conversation. Look for a kind of a deep dive. We're hoping to talk to Jim C from Premier Rides about
Great.
Yes, about the Italian Job Stunt Track as well. So look for that on Coaster101.com. We've got, like I said, a whole series of these of coasters that opened in 2005, turning 20, just like Coaster 101 did. But yeah, that's going to do it for this week's episode of Coaster 101 podcast. Dave, if the people want to find you, where can they find you?
Just go to davecobb.com and that will link to my link tree. That's got all my links there, previous podcast appearances, stuff from my old podcast, Rat Castle. Lots of fun stuff to poke through there, including my YouTube channel, which is where it's not only stuff that I post from my own projects, but when I find videos of fun stuff that I've worked on, I post them in playlists there, so you can spelunk through that as well. I'm most active on Blue Sky is where you usually can find my cranky old man theme park opinions on Blue Sky.
I also have cranky old man theme park opinions, and we post them all over the place on anywhere you find social media. So Facebook, Blue Sky, Instagram, TikTok. Dave, you got a good TikTok account too. I gotta throw a little applause your way.
Thank
for
you.
That. So.
You're gonna if you join me on TikTok, you're gonna see a lot of my dog. He's an adorable husky named Ziggy Stardog because he's a redhead like David Bowie. He's got his own Instagram, actually. If you want to follow me on Instagram, you can follow him, Ziggy Stardog Husky. All of that is linked on my link tree.
I love it. Well, after you follow Dave and Ziggy, follow Coaster 101 anywhere you get your social media. We've got a store, coaster101.com/merch. It's got some great theme park inspired. It's got our new 20th anniversary logo merch. And if you're listening, make sure you're liking, rating, reviewing, subscribing, and telling people on the internet about this great episode of the Coaster 101 podcast with Dave Cobb. If you're on Coaster Internet, you'll probably find something wrong with it. But first of all, you're wrong because there was nothing wrong with this episode. It was great.
It's perfect.
It was fantastic. It was amazing. So we love 5-star ratings. We love reviews. And the more of those we get, the better chance we have of getting great guests like Dave back on our podcast. So Dave, like I said, every time you and I talk, be it about theme parks or whatever else is going on in the world, I leave far more knowledgeable than I was when we started. And it's just like I said, as a nerdy kid who grew up loving this stuff and now has it as kind of a side project in my 30s. It's great to get to talk to people like you.
It's always a pleasure. Always a pleasure, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And that's going to do it. We will talk to y'all again soon. See ya.